I'm Tekie. I'm mum of one. I've got a little daughter called Ava who's nearly 2 years old, and I'm Australian but I live in London. I was, I think, about 8 months pregnant, and I was lying on the couch just trying to relax, and I opened up the latest National Geographic, and of course it was tucked away at the back, but there was an article talking about how in the US black mums and birthing persons are 3 times more likely to die from childbirth and childbirth related complications. And I remember so clearly thinking, that's really bad, but that's in the US, and we all know that they've got a heightened sense of racism and oppression, and I thought, well, it can't be like that here in the UK. And then of course I was completely gobsmacked to find out that here in the UK black women and birthing persons are 5 times more likely to die from childbirth and childbirth related complications compared to their white counterparts. And it was a lot to take on. At that stage there wasn't the statistics of mixed race persons either, and I was sitting there thinking, is this applicable to me? How is this going to affect my birth experience? And it really just highlighted the difficult thing of, you need to be informed and have information, but then also there is a cost to gaining this information and how to process that in a way to make it a positive impact in your birthing experience. The concept of weathering speaks to how, as a black person, every day you are accumulating these little tiny, microaggressions, the way you're treated, the way society makes you feel like you don't fit in. Effectively, it's the consequence of racism on your body and how it deteriorates our bodies. Our bodies actually start to break down because we're existing in a permanent state of fight or flight. And you put that with being pregnant and the way that the healthcare systems are failing black persons, birthing persons, and it's like a perfect storm. So I remember sitting there and just being a little bit overwhelmed and really emotional. Being pregnant, you're emotional anyway, but really emotional reading these stories in the National Geographic. It was grandmothers looking after their grandchildren because their daughter has died because she wasn't listened to, because she wasn't given the care. And the thing with weathering, it's really particular in that it transcends the socioeconomic circumstance that we often attribute to these statistics. You have a case where a black woman who's 40 years old, highly educated, she's got lots of money behind her. I think she's just as likely to have as poor, if not worse, outcomes than a 16-year-old white girl who hasn't completed her high school education. So it's a big issue, and one that is it's probably not the best time to find out when you're probably on the doorstep of giving birth. I think in a way, maybe I was fortunate in that I didn't have a whole 9 months to stew on this idea, but it was quite confronting being pregnant and then having this to contend with as well, and not having the answers of what this means to my birth experience, whether I'm going to be able to birth in autonomy and safety. It's quite a heavy thing to carry, in addition to all the other emotions and expectations and unknowns you're facing, especially as a first-time mum. And it wasn't a conversation that we were having as loudly as we perhaps have been this year. I think the conversation's definitely been elevated. So 2 years ago, it was quite a lot, and lonely as well, actually, a lonely experience. I think speaking of microaggressions, one of the ones that I felt impacted me greatest throughout my pregnancy was lack of representation. And that went from doing my pregnancy courses. I think breastfeeding was a really big one, where you only ever saw pink nipples, and even postpartum, it's impacted my experience as well, again with breastfeeding. But it's just hard when you don't see yourself there, and in a positive way, when you're only represented in terms of these dire statistics. You really have to dig deep to find a place within yourself where you can celebrate your experience. When it came to my own birth experience, I think it took me by surprise. I'd planned and hoped for a home birth, but I ended up having to go to hospital for the way my birth was unfolding. the reason that I went to hospital actually turned out to be of little concern to the midwife who saw me. But my waters had been gone at that point for over 36 hours. And I'd done my own research. I talked to my home birth midwifery team. I talked to my doula, and I felt safe in that I was happy to give my baby in my body 48 hours. And we'd essentially signed off with the midwife, and she'd said this was all right, and I was trying for a home birth, so I was ready to go home, and I didn't feel particularly comfortable at hospital at that point in time. And so she'd asked for a doctor to come and sign me off. And the doctor came in and it was like a whirlwind. She didn't acknowledge herself, or she didn't ask for my name. It was literally just, we're going to put you on antibiotics and we're going to put you on a drip to start the birthing process, to induce me. And it was just such a shock. I was ready to go home. It was late at night. And I think it's just hard because you don't know the moment you're going to be called upon to fight for your birth. And I think I did. I fought for my birth. I went home where I was feeling, where I wanted to be, where I was going to be safe. But the cost to my birth, it just changed the whole course of everything, because I never felt safe within my body again. I had the doctor saying that if I was to leave, I'm putting my baby at risk. She's probably going to die because I'm chasing this birth I have in mind. And it made me feel like I was being inflexible. You know, the cost of my inflexibility and chasing this birth was going to cost me my baby's life. That's huge. That's not something you can just shake off. And so even though I went home, I think from that point, my adrenaline had kicked in. I was crying, I was yelling at the doctor to stop telling me all this information. And so I think it's really tough when people say, you know, you have to advocate for yourself. That's true, but we also need to talk about the cost of that to your birth. And it created a situation where I went home and things were changing in a way that I felt I probably needed to go back to hospital. But I was in tears on the bathroom floor because I didn't want to go back to see this doctor, to a situation where they weren't going to listen to me, where I didn't have autonomy over my body, where I wasn't going to be able to trust myself anymore. I think that's the biggest thing that she took away from, was the trust I had worked really hard and invested in building in my body's capacity to have my baby. It's taken a lot. It probably took me about 10 months for it to really sink in, and it's taken a lot to work through that, and I'll always just be so sad. I'm not, I guess the emotions around it don't own me anymore, but I'll always be sad that me and my daughter never got to have a different kind of birth experience. And I don't think it's that it had to be at home in the water, you know, and the dim lighting and all that. That would have been lovely, but I think I could have had a hospital birth where I felt that I was birthing in my own sovereignty, where I got to make decisions, where I was consulted and listened to and respected. And I think the hard thing too is that because of the color of my skin that situation occurred, or was it just that particular doctor on that day? I don't know. But definitely, I think, especially off the back of reading what I had done and all that we're continuing to talk about, I always think maybe that was, and you'll never really know. I do think I was so lucky that I did get to advocate for myself, that I had the knowledge and a team behind me. And there's a great privilege in that as well, that financially I could support myself, or I could fortify myself in that way. And I just think it's a double-edged sword, I also think, really, from my experience. And we need to develop a way for us to be informed, but we also need to be considerate of the situation that people are in when they're receiving the information. I think the statistic of people being 5 times more likely to die, if I was in a situation where I felt I couldn't do anything to change that, I think it's really for the medical community, for the practitioners, for the midwives, for the doctors, for even, I guess, for birth keepers and doulas. Like, we all need to be having these conversations on how we can better inform ourselves to create a safe environment for people to receive the information. It's not just about putting it back on us and saying we need to advocate for ourselves, that we need to equip ourselves. I think we need to talk about it in a really holistic manner. And I think if I could go back in time, it would be interesting to think of the things I'd do differently. It would have been nice maybe to have had that information earlier on, or even better would be when I wasn't pregnant. Even better again would be that these statistics don't even exist. I think we need to do a better job. I know in response to the Embrace reports, people have been talking about continuity of care, but it's larger than that. We need to have the research behind us. We need to be asking people about their experiences. I think we need to look at a way that Black women and birthing persons can have an experience that's culturally safe, that's culturally relevant, that celebrates their bodies, their Blackness. I think there's so much that is put upon us. It's our bodies that are different. It's our way of living that's different. Whereas for the system to actually recognize where it's failing and to look to lift itself up, I think that's where we need to really be focusing our energy and our time. Birthing the future, I think it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of patience. It's going to take a lot of reconfiguring what parenthood can be. I think it's about looking to dismantle so much of what is wrong in the world with our children in mind. I think we're looking at so many hard things. And I think for us to think of how we're going to educate them, I think it's also another opportunity for us. I think it's going to take a lot of patience. It's going to take a lot of time and energy and commitment. And I hope a lot of joy as well. I hope a lot of joy. It's something they continue to give to us every day.